10 o'clock at night. The hallway of the old apartment building sat under dim yellow light that flickered every few seconds. David Harper had just gotten his son to sleep when he heard hesitant knocking from the unit across the hall. The woman who'd moved in last week said her TV had no signal. He grabbed his toolbox and crossed over, kneeling behind the screen to check the cables. When the TV flickered to life, blue light washed across the face of the woman standing behind him. David stood up. Both of them went silent. 10 years had passed, but the past had just walked through the door. David Harper was 34 years old. He lived with his son, Connor, in a cramped two-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of the Riverside Towers, a building that had been luxury in 1978 and was now just old. The carpet was worn thin in patches where generations of tenants had walked the same paths. The kitchen cabinets closed crooked. The bathroom faucet dripped no matter how tight you turned it. But the rent was affordable. The neighborhood was safe, and Connor had a room with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that David had stuck up there one weekend when his son turned 5. David's life moved in a tight, predictable loop. He woke at 6 every morning. Made breakfast, usually scrambled eggs and toast, sometimes oatmeal if he had time. Dropped Connor at Riverside Elementary at 7:45. Drove 15 minutes to Bennett Electronics, a repair shop that serviced everything from old radios to industrial circuit boards. He worked until 3, fixing broken things that other people had given up on. Left early to pick Connor up at 3:30. Helped with homework at the kitchen table while dinner simmered on the stove. Read bedtime stories until his son's breathing slowed and evened out around 8:30. No friends, no dating, no past that he talked about. Just the rule he'd carved into his chest years ago, the one that governed every decision. What's best for Connor? Everything else fell away. On weekends, they went to Miller Park. Connor climbed on the jungle gym while David sat on a bench with a thermos of coffee, watching. Other parents chatted in clusters, exchanging phone numbers and setting up playdates. David stayed alone. Not unfriendly, he'd nod if someone made eye contact. Would help if a kid fell and needed a Band-Aid from his backpack just separate. Like he existed in a parallel version of the playground, where sound didn't quite carry. Connor was 7 now. Small for his age, with David's dark hair and a gap between his front teeth that the dentist said would close on its own. He asked questions constantly. Why was the sky blue? Where did electricity come from? How did birds know where to fly? Why didn't they have a mom like the other kids? David answered the first 3 with the patience of someone who genuinely enjoyed explaining how the world worked. The 4th, he dodged. It's just us, buddy. That's how it is. Connor accepted this, the way kids accept weather, something you can't change, so you adapt. In the evenings, after Connor slept, David sat at the kitchen table with a mug of tea that went cold while he went through bills. Rent was due on the 1st. Utilities fluctuated but averaged $80 a month. Groceries were carefully planned to minimize waste. Connor's school supplies, clothes that fit a growing kid, the occasional birthday present for a classmate's party. Everything balanced to the dollar. No room for error, no room for surprises. The apartment walls were thin. He heard Mrs. Patterson above him, walking her endless laps from bedroom to kitchen at 3 in the morning. The couple next door, the Rodriguezes, arguing in muted Spanish bursts that rose and fell like ocean waves. Mr. Chen at the end of the hall, coughing through the night. A wet rattle that made David wince every time. Life was small, predictable, and safe. That was the point. David had built this life brick by brick after Connor's mother Melissa left when their son was 6 months old. She'd signed the custody papers without argument, packed 2 suitcases, and disappeared into a life David knew nothing about. No postcards. No birthday calls. Just gone. He'd been terrified at first. A 27-year-old man who didn't know how to change a diaper properly, who burned mac and cheese, who once put Connor's onesie on backward and didn't notice until the pediatrician pointed it out. But he'd learned. Read books. watched tutorial videos on his phone at 2 in the morning while Connor cried with colic, called the nurse hotline more times than he could count. Slowly, clumsily, he figured it out. And he'd promised himself that Connor would never feel abandoned the way David had once felt. Never wonder if he was enough. Never question whether he was loved. So David had made himself smaller, cut out everything that wasn't essential, became the kind of father who showed up to every school event, who knew the names of all Connor's teachers, who kept emergency snacks in his car and Band-Aids in his wallet. It was enough. It had to be. The moving truck arrived on a Saturday morning in late September. David heard it from the kitchen, where he was making pancakes, the scrape of furniture against the lobby floor, footsteps in the hallway, the slam of the building's main door. Over and over, Connor pressed his face to the peephole, standing on his tiptoes. "Someone's moving into 4B, he announced, breath fogging the glass. David flipped a pancake. "Okay. It's been empty for a long time. 2 months. Can I go say hi?" "No. Let them settle in first." Connor wandered back to the table, disappointed but obedient. He poured syrup in careful circles on his pancakes, while David cleaned the griddle. By evening, the hallway had gone quiet again. David assumed it was a couple, or maybe a small family. The building didn't get many single tenants, the units were too small for the rent they charged. Made sense only if you split the cost. He didn't think about it much. New neighbors came and went. The building had high turnover. Then came the knock. It was late past 10. Connor had been asleep for an hour. David was halfway through a load of laundry, sorting whites from colors at the kitchen table because the apartment didn't have space for a proper folding area, when he heard the tentative tap-tap-tap at the door. He looked through the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway, arms crossed against the chill that always crept into the building at night despite the ancient heating system. She wore jeans and an oversized gray sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked tired in a way that went deeper than just one long day. David opened the door. "I'm sorry to bother you this late," she said immediately, words tumbling out like she'd rehearsed them. "I'm Claire. I just moved in across the hall. My TV isn't getting any signal, and I don't know if it's the cable or the connection or if I need to call someone, but I saw the light under your door, and I thought maybe you'd know what to check before I waste money on a service call tomorrow." She paused for breath. David hesitated. He didn't do this, talk to neighbors beyond basic pleasantries, get involved in their problems, open doors to his carefully controlled life. But she looked exhausted, and it was a simple fix. 5 minutes, maximum. "Yeah, I can take a look." Relief flooded her face. "Thank you, so much." He grabbed his toolbox from the closet, a battered red metal case that had belonged to his father and was now held together with duct tape and hope. Followed her across the hall. Her apartment was a maze of half-unpacked boxes. The couch sat in the middle of the room, still wrapped in plastic. A single floor lamp glowed in the corner, casting long shadows. The air smelled like cardboard and lemon cleaning solution. Dishes were stacked on the counter, still in newspaper. Books filled 3 boxes near the window. "Sorry for the mess," Claire said, gesturing helplessly at the chaos. "I wasn't expecting to move this fast." Everything kind of happened at once. David knelt behind the TV, a mid-range Samsung that looked a few years old. "You come from far?" "Not really. Across town." She paused, and he could feel her deciding whether to say more. "I just got divorced. Needed a fresh start. New place. New neighborhood. New everything." He didn't respond, just kept his hands busy checking the cables behind the TV. The coaxial cable was connected properly. The power cord was fine. But the HDMI cable connecting the cable box to the TV had worked itself loose, probably got jostled during the move. David reseated it, checked the input settings on the TV, and powered everything back on. The screen flickered blue, then resolved into a news broadcast. A weatherman pointing at a map of weekend temperatures. "There you go. Oh my God, thank you." Her voice was quiet, genuine. "I'm sorry. I should have checked that myself. I just didn't even think about the cables in back. Easy to miss." David stood, brushing dust off his knees, and turned to leave. That's when the light from the TV caught her face at a different angle. She had a thin, silver necklace, a small pendant in the shape of a compass, the kind you could buy at a flea market or vintage shop. His breath stopped. He knew that necklace. He'd bought it himself a decade ago, summer before senior year of college. Gave it to someone he thought he'd spend his life with. Told her the compass would always point her home. Cheesy romantic nonsense that had felt profound at 19. His eyes moved from the necklace to her face, really looked this time. Not just the polite glance you give a neighbor. The shape of her jaw. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. The faint scar above her left eyebrow from when she'd fallen off her bike as a kid. It wasn't possible. Claire, if that was even her real name, stood frozen, staring back at him. Her lips parted slightly, like she was about to say something. Neither of them spoke. The silence stretched until it became painful, until the news anchor's voice from the TV felt obscenely loud. Finally, David grabbed his toolbox and walked out without a word. The door clicked shut behind him. David shut his apartment door and leaned against it, heart hammering against his ribs so hard he thought it might crack them. It couldn't be her. Emma Calloway. 10 years ago, she'd been the only person who'd ever made him feel like he wasn't just taking up space in the world, marking time until something happened. They'd met at a summer job the year before graduation, both working at the Riverside Community Center running programs for kids. She taught art workshops in the mornings. He ran tech classes in the afternoons, teaching teenagers how to build websites and edit videos. They'd fallen together fast and inevitable, like objects rolling downhill. Spent every evening walking by the river, talking until the streetlights came on and the mosquitoes drove them inside. Made plans. Stupid, earnest, specific plans about the future. They'd move to the city, get a small apartment together. She'd teach art at a community college. He'd work in tech support somewhere while figuring out what he really wanted to do. They'd adopt a dog, name it something ridiculous, get married eventually. But there was no rush. They had time. They had forever. Then one night in August, Emma disappeared. No explanation. No goodbye. Just gone. David had called, texted, left voicemails that progressed from worried to angry to desperate. Showed up at her apartment. Her roommate said she'd moved out suddenly. Wouldn't say where. Family emergency. That was all she'd offer. Wouldn't say more. He'd searched for months. Asked mutual friends. Checked places they used to go together. Eventually stopped because the hope was worse than the absence. And now she was across the hall, using a different name, acting like she didn't know him. David slid down to the floor, toolbox beside him, hands shaking. In her apartment, Emma Claire stood in the exact spot he'd left her. The TV droned on, unwatched. Weather gave way to sports highlights. She didn't move to change the channel. She'd recognized him the second he stepped into the light. The voice first. That particular way he said yeah when agreeing to help someone, like he was reluctant but couldn't help himself. Then his posture, the slight hunch of someone who'd spent years bent over repair work. The way he tilted his head when he concentrated, tongue barely visible between his teeth. David Harper. The man she'd run from 10 years ago because staying would have destroyed him. She pressed her palms against her eyes and let out a breath that turned into a sob she barely managed to choke back. She hadn't known he lived here. Hadn't known he was even in the same city. She'd picked this building because it was affordable, because it was available immediately, because the landlord didn't ask too many questions when she explained she was newly divorced, and yes, she had job history and references. Please just let me sign the lease. And now David was 10 feet away, on the other side of a thin wall, with a life she'd never been part of, a life that had gone on without her. Emma sank onto the plastic-wrapped couch and cried until her throat hurt. 3 days passed. David avoided the hallway like it was contaminated. left early for work, earlier than necessary, sitting in his car in the Bennett Electronics parking lot for 20 minutes before his shift started. Came home late, taking the long way back, stopping at the grocery store even when they didn't need anything. Kept Connor inside on the weekend, inventing reasons why they shouldn't go to the park. It might rain. I have work to catch up on. Let's build your Lego set instead. Connor accepted these excuses with growing suspicion, but didn't argue. On Tuesday evening, while David was in the shower, Connor got bored. The apartment felt small suddenly. The Lego spaceship was finished. His coloring books were all colored. He could hear voices in the hallway, kids from 4C playing, their laughter echoing. Connor opened the front door and wandered into the hall. The door to 4B was propped open with a cardboard box. Music drifted out, something soft and acoustic, a woman's voice singing about rivers and roads. Connor peeked inside. Claire was kneeling on the floor, unpacking dishes from a box marked kitchen, fragile. She looked up and smiled, the kind of smile adults give kids they don't know, warm but cautious. Hi there. Hi, I'm Connor. I'm Claire. You live across the hall? He nodded. With my dad? He's the one who fixed your TV. I know. He was very helpful. She pulled out a coffee mug, checked it for cracks, set it on the counter. Are you supposed to be wandering the hallway by yourself? Connor shrugged. Dad's in the shower. I got bored. Are you married? The question caught her off guard. Not anymore. Me neither. He said it like it was a club they both belonged to, a shared experience. Claire's smile faltered for just a second. Do you want to help me unpack these plates? I could use an extra pair of hands. Connor's face lit up. He crossed the threshold and knelt beside her, and for the next 10 minutes, they worked in companionable silence punctuated by Connor's chatter about school, his favorite cartoons, a drawing he'd made of a spaceship that his teacher had hung on the bulletin board. Claire listened with the kind of attention that made kids feel like what they were saying actually mattered. Then David appeared in the doorway. His hair was still damp from the shower. He was barefoot, wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt. His face went pale when he saw Connor kneeling beside Claire. Connor. Inside. Now, Connor looked startled. He'd heard his father be firm before, but never quite like this sharp, almost scared. But I'm helping. The boy scrambled to his feet, mumbled a goodbye to Claire, and hurried past his father into the hallway. David didn't look at Claire, just grabbed Connor's hand and pulled him back across the hall. The door shut hard enough that Mr. Chen down the hall shouted something irritated about noise. Claire sat alone on her floor, surrounded by half-unpacked dishes, tears streaming down her face. She hadn't expected that. The child, Connor, David's son. The boy had his eyes that particular shade of brown that looked almost amber in certain light. His way of tilting his head when he was listening, like he was trying to hear something underneath the words. His careful way of holding fragile things, conscious of his own strength. She'd lost that chance 10 years ago. Lost the baby she'd barely had time to imagine holding. And here was proof of the life that had gone on without her. The family David had built with someone else. The universe had moved forward, and she was standing in the same place she'd been a decade ago, still carrying the weight of what she'd lost. Living across the hall made avoidance impossible. The building had one elevator that broke down twice a week, so most residents used the stairs. The mailboxes were in the lobby. The laundry room was in the basement. Every mundane necessity forced them into shared spaces. They passed in the stairwell on Wednesday morning. David coming down with Connor, heading to school. Claire going up with a load of laundry. Morning, she said quietly. David nodded, didn't quite meet her eyes. Morning? Connor waved enthusiastically. Hi, Claire. She waved back, heart cracking a little. Thursday evening, they waited for the elevator together. The button was lit, the machinery groaning somewhere above them. Claire tried to make conversation. How have you been? Fine, thanks. It's been a while. Yeah, I'm glad to see her. We should go. David grabbed Connor's hand and headed for the stairs instead, even though they'd just waited 5 minutes for the elevator. Friday night, Claire was checking her mail when David came in with Connor. She stepped aside to give them space at the mailboxes. Connor immediately started telling her about his week. "We had a field trip to the fire station. I got to sit in the fire truck. And the firefighter let me hold the hose, but it wasn't on, obviously, because that would be dangerous. And then Connor, we need to get upstairs," David interrupted, mail clenched in his fist. "But I'm telling Claire about." "Now, please." Connor's face fell. He followed his father to the stairs, glancing back at Claire with confusion. She stayed in the lobby for a long time after they left, pretending to organize her mail, fighting the urge to go upstairs and pound on David's door and demand he let her explain everything. But she didn't, because she had no right to demand anything. The following Tuesday, they ended up in the elevator together, all three of them, because the elevator chose that moment to finally work. The space was suffocatingly small, barely 6 by 6 feet. The fluorescent light buzzed. Connor filled the silence the way kids do when adults won't. "Dad, Claire helped me with my math homework yesterday when you were at work. Mrs. Patterson couldn't help because she doesn't see numbers very well anymore. But Claire came over and she's really good at fractions." David's jaw tightened. His hand on the toolbox he was carrying went white-knuckled. "That's nice. She said she used to be a teacher. Interesting. She taught art to middle schoolers. And she showed me how to draw horses. Look." Connor pulled a folded paper from his backpack, carefully smoothed it out. A horse in profile. Surprisingly well proportioned for a 7-year-old's work. David looked at the drawing for a long moment. "That's good, buddy." The elevator dinged. 4th floor. David ushered Connor out without another word. Claire stayed inside, riding down to the lobby even though she'd been heading up to her apartment. She sat on the lobby couch for 20 minutes, staring at the bulletin board covered in notices for lost cats and yoga classes, and someone selling a barely used air conditioner. Mrs. Patterson found her there, shuffling in with her walker to check her mail. "You okay, dear?" Claire wiped her eyes quickly. "Yeah, just tired. Moving is exhausting." Mrs. Patterson sorted through her mail with shaky hands. "But you'll settle in. Everyone does, eventually. I hope so." The old woman patted her shoulder and shuffled toward the elevator. Claire sat there until the evening shadows stretched across the lobby floor. It happened on a Thursday. Connor had stayed after school for art club. David was running late to pick him up. A repair at work had taken longer than expected. The customer had argued about the bill. Traffic was terrible. He rushed down the hallway at 3:50, keys jangling, mentally calculating how long Connor would have to wait, and found Connor sitting on the floor outside Claire's apartment, showing her a drawing. "This is you and me and Dad," Connor was saying, pointing at 3 stick figures holding hands. "We're a family. See, we're at the park, and that's the duck pond, and those are the swings." Claire was sitting cross-legged on the hallway floor, back against her door, looking at the drawing with an expression David couldn't quite read. "It's beautiful," she said softly. David froze. Connor noticed him. "Dad, look what I drew." Claire's head snapped up. Her face went white. "Connor, come on. We need to go." "But I wanted to show Claire." "Dad, you're being weird." "Connor." His voice was harder than he meant it to be. Now, Connor stood slowly, clutching his drawing, confusion written across his face. David looked at Claire for the first time in days. Really looked. "Why are you here?" His voice was low, controlled, but there was something sharp and dangerous underneath. Claire stood slowly, brushing off her jeans. "I told you. I just moved. No." He took a step closer, hyper-aware that Connor was watching but unable to stop himself. "Why are you here? In this building? On this floor? Across from me? Don't tell me it's a coincidence." "David, I swear to you, I didn't know you lived here." "You expect me to believe that?" After 10 years of nothing, you just happened to move into the apartment across from mine? I didn't know. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. I needed a place quickly. Dad, what's going on? Connor's voice was small, scared. David closed his eyes, took a breath. When he opened them, his face was carefully blank again. Nothing, buddy. Let's go. He turned toward their apartment, and Claire finally broke. I was pregnant. David stopped mid-step. Connor looked confused. What does that mean? Go inside, Connor, David said quietly, not turning around. Please. Connor looked between them, then obeyed, crossing the hall with backward glances. David didn't turn around. Claire's voice shook. 10 years ago. The night before I left, I found out I was pregnant. The hallway was silent except for the hum of the building's old heating system kicking on, the distant sound of someone's TV through thin walls. I was going to tell you the next day, she continued. I had it all planned out. Then what? She couldn't say it. David finally turned. His face was unreadable, carefully controlled, like he was using every ounce of energy to keep himself together. Finish. Claire steadied herself against the doorframe. Her legs felt like they might give out. I took 3 tests, all positive. I made an appointment with a doctor to confirm it. The words came out mechanical, like she was reading from a script. I was going to tell you that weekend. I bought this stupid card. It had a picture of baby shoes on it, something cheesy from the drugstore. I was going to make dinner, your favorite pasta dish, and give you the card after we ate. David said nothing, just stood there, toolbox still in his hand. But that Friday afternoon, my sister called. Claire's voice went flat. Clinical, the way people talk about trauma when they've told the story too many times. My mom had collapsed at home, massive stroke. They didn't think she'd make it through the night. I drove straight to the hospital. 4 hours. I tried to call you from the road, but my phone died and I didn't have a charger, and by the time I got there, everything was chaos. I would have come to you, David said quietly. I know you would have. Claire wiped her eyes roughly. But by the time I got home 3 days later, my mom survived. Barely. But she survived. You'd already left me a message. You said you'd figured it out. That I'd obviously moved on. That you weren't going to wait around for someone who didn't have the decency to say goodbye. David's face drained of color as he remembered. The message he'd left in a moment of hurt and pride. The message he'd regretted within hours, but had been too stubborn to take back. I tried calling back, Claire said. You'd blocked my number. I went to your apartment, you'd moved out. Your roommate said you'd gone back home, didn't know where. I asked around. No one knew where you'd gone. So you just gave up? No. Her voice hardened. I spent 4 months looking for you. Called your parents' house, they hung up on me, tried to find you through mutual friends. No one would tell me anything, and I lost the baby. Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. The heating system kicked off. Somewhere above them, Mrs. Patterson's footsteps creaked across her floor. I was 12 weeks along, Claire whispered. I went to a routine checkup. First real appointment, the one where they're supposed to do an ultrasound, let you hear the heartbeat. They couldn't find it. Spontaneous miscarriage. The doctor said it happens. 20% of pregnancies. Nothing I could have done differently. Just bad luck. David's knees nearly gave out. He set the toolbox down before he dropped it. They did a procedure. D&C, they call it. I was alone. My sister was still with my mom. I couldn't find you. I didn't have anyone else. She was crying now, not trying to hide it. And after that, I thought maybe it was better you didn't know. You didn't need to carry that grief. You hadn't even known about the pregnancy. What was the point of telling you about something you'd lost when you didn't even know it existed? You should have. His voice broke. You should have kept trying to find me. I know. I thought you'd just left. Like I didn't matter. Like we didn't matter. You were all that mattered. David slid down to sit on the hallway floor, back against the wall. He looked younger, suddenly, more like the 19-year-old she'd known than the man he'd become. Claire sat across from him, back against her doorframe. Her knees pulled up to her chest. They stayed like that for a long time. Long enough that Mr. Chen passed them on his way to the elevator, gave them a curious look, kept walking. I married someone else, Claire finally said. 4 years later, Richard, good man, stable job, CPA, nice family. We tried to have kids tried for 3 years. Couldn't. Doctor said there was nothing technically wrong. Sometimes it just doesn't happen. I think my body just shut that door. Decided once was enough trauma. She picked at a loose thread on her jeans. We divorced last year. Mutual. No drama, no infidelity. We just realized one day that we'd built a life on top of a foundation that wasn't there. We were friends, pretending to be in love because we both wanted to want it. Does that make sense? David nodded slowly. Why'd you change your name? I didn't. Not legally. Claire's my middle name, Emma Claire Calloway. I started using it after the divorce. Fresh start, clean slate. Emma felt like a different person from a different life. She touched the compass necklace. I kept this, though. Kept a lot of things. Your old t-shirt, ticket stubs from movies we saw, stupid stuff. I kept things too. The mug you made me in your pottery class. It's chipped, but I still use it. Claire's breath caught. They sat in silence for another stretch of time. What about Connor's mother? Claire asked quietly. Melissa. We dated for 6 months. She got pregnant. We tried to make it work. Got married when she was 4 months along courthouse wedding. Nothing fancy. She lasted 6 months after Connor was born. Left a note on the kitchen table. Signed custody papers her lawyer mailed me 2 weeks later. I haven't heard from her since. I'm sorry. Don't be. Connor doesn't remember her. And honestly, I think we would have been miserable if she'd stayed. We didn't love each other. We were just trying to do what we thought we were supposed to do. He's a good kid. He is. David's voice softened. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. I was a mess before he came along. Working dead-end jobs, drinking too much, living in a basement apartment with 2 other guys. Connor made me grow up. You were always good, David. You just needed a reason to believe it. He looked at her across the 3 feet of hallway that separated them. Why'd you keep the necklace? Because it was the only thing I had left of you. And because even after everything, I never stopped. She trailed off. Stopped what? Hoping I'd find my way back. They sat in the hallway until past midnight. At some point, David went to check on Connor, found him asleep in his bed, still wearing his school clothes, the drawing of the 3-person family clutched in one hand. David carefully pried the paper free, tucked his son under the covers, and came back to sit down again. They didn't talk much after that, just sat. The building settled around them. Pipes creaked. Someone flushed a toilet. Mrs. Patterson's TV murmured through the walls. Some late-night talk show she always fell asleep watching. Eventually, Claire spoke. I don't expect anything from you. I know. I'm not here to disrupt your life or make claims or ask for things I don't have a right to ask for. I know. But I am sorry. For all of it. For not trying harder. For disappearing. For not being there when you needed me. David was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough with exhaustion. I'm sorry too. For assuming the worst. For blocking your number. For not trying harder to find you. For believing you'd just abandoned me without a thought. We were kids. We were old enough to know better. Claire smiled faintly. Maybe. Or maybe we were exactly as young and stupid as we needed to be to learn what not to do. David looked at her, really looked, for the first time since that night 10 years ago when everything fell apart. She'd changed. Lines at the corners of her eyes that hadn't been there before. A tiredness in her posture, like she'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. Her hands had small scars, one across the back of her left hand, another on her right thumb. Signs of a life lived, of years that had passed without him, but still her. Still the person who'd made him believe he could be someone worth loving. "I haven't loved anyone else," he said quietly. "Tried a few times. Dated a woman named Sarah for about 4 months when Connor was 3. Nice person. Worked at the library. Connor liked her, but it never felt right. Always felt like I was faking it, playing a part." Claire's eyes welled up. "Me too. Richard was a good husband on paper. But I was always comparing him to a memory. Always measuring everything against a summer 10 years ago. That's not fair to anyone. Connor's mom left when he was 6 months old. Just couldn't handle it. The crying, the exhaustion, the way your whole life disappears into taking care of someone else. She signed over custody without a fight. I don't even know where she is now. I'm sorry. Don't be. He's better off. And honestly, so am I. We figured it out together, me and him. Built our own little world." David paused. "He's happy. That's what matters. He's a good kid." "He is. He looks like you. Everyone says that. He has your eyes. And your way of listening, like he's really hearing what people are saying underneath the words." David's throat tightened. "He asked me once why he doesn't have a mom. I didn't know what to tell him." "What did you say?" "That some families look different. That it's just the 2 of us, and that's okay." "That's a good answer. I don't know if he believes it." "I don't know if I believe it." Silence settled again, but it was different now. Softer, less sharp. Then David said, "I don't know what this is. Neither do I. But I'm not ready to just erase 10 years and pick up where we left off. I can't do that. I wouldn't ask you to. I have to think about Connor. Everything I do, every choice I make, has to be about what's best for him. That's the rule. That's all I have. I know. I can't let someone into his life who might leave. He's already been abandoned once. I won't let it happen again." "I understand." David stood, knees creaking. Held out a hand. Claire took it. Let him pull her up. They stood in the hallway, hands still touching, inches apart. "Can I take you to coffee sometime?" Claire asked. "Just coffee. No expectations. No pressure. Just 2 people who used to know each other catching up." David hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to say no, to protect himself and Connor from the possibility of more hurt. But looking at her face, tired, hopeful, scared, he couldn't. "Yeah, okay. When? Saturday? Connor has a playdate in the afternoon. I could meet you at 2. The coffee shop on 3rd Street? That place is still open?" I checked. "It is." David almost smiled. "Okay. 2 o'clock. Okay." They stood there for another moment, neither quite ready to let go. Finally, David stepped back. "Good night, Claire." "Good night, David." He crossed to his apartment, paused with his hand on the doorknob. "The necklace looks good on you." She touched it reflexively. "I never take it off." He went inside. Claire stood in the hallway for a long time after his door closed, fingers wrapped around the compass pendant, feeling its weight against her chest like an anchor. Coffee turned into 2 coffees. The first one was awkward. They sat across from each other at the coffee shop on 3rd Street, the place that miraculously still existed, still had the same cracked leather booths and the same grumpy owner who made the best espresso in the city. They talked carefully about neutral things, Connor's school, Claire's freelance illustration work, the building's broken elevator, the weather. Neither mentioned the hallway conversation. Neither mentioned what had happened 10 years ago. It was like they were strangers learning each other for the first time. The second coffee, a week later, went deeper. David talked about the first year with Connor, the terror and exhaustion and bone-deep certainty that he was failing every single day. Claire talked about the miscarriage, the procedure, the months after when she couldn't look at pregnant women without feeling like someone had carved out part of her chest. They were both crying by the end, in a coffee shop booth at 3 in the afternoon. and the grumpy owner brought them extra napkins without comment. Then a walk in the park while Connor played. David watched his son on the jungle gym while Claire sat beside him on the bench. Not too close, maintaining careful distance. Connor noticed her and ran over. "Claire, do you want to see how high I can swing?" "I'd love to." They walked to the swings together. Connor pumped his legs, going higher and higher, shouting, "Watch this," every few seconds. Claire watched with genuine delight, calling encouragement, laughing when Connor tried to jump off at the peak and David had to sprint over to steady him. On the walk home, Connor held both their hands, swinging between them like a bridge. David caught Claire's eye over Connor's head. She smiled. Something warm unclenched in his chest. Then Claire started helping Connor with homework. It began organically. David was running late from work one day, a complicated repair that wouldn't cooperate, a customer who wouldn't stop calling with additional problems. He texted Mrs. Patterson to ask if she could sit with Connor until he got home. She texted back, "My arthritis is bad today, dear. Can't make it down the stairs." "Ask Claire?" David stared at his phone for a long moment, then texted Claire, "Could you watch Connor for an hour? I'm stuck at work. We'll pay you." Her response came immediately. "Of course. Don't be silly about payment. Send him over." When David got home 90 minutes later, full of apologies, he found Claire and Connor at her kitchen table, surrounded by math worksheets and pencils. "Fractions," Claire explained. "We're conquering them together." Connor looked up, grinning. "Claire makes them make sense." David felt his throat tighten. "Thank you. Anytime." It became a pattern. 3-4 times a week, Connor would knock on Claire's door after school. She always let him in. They'd do homework together, or she'd teach him to draw. Or they'd just talk while she worked on her illustration projects. David would pick him up an hour or two later. Never stayed long, never sat down. Just collected his son and went home. But slowly, the walls came down. One evening, Claire knocked on David's door with a casserole dish. "I made too much lasagna. Thought you might want some." It was obviously a lie. The dish was the perfect size for exactly one family dinner. But David accepted it, invited her in. They ate together at the small kitchen table. Connor chattered about his day. Claire and David traded small smiles over his head. After dinner, Connor asked if Claire wanted to see his Lego collection. She said yes. David did the dishes while they played in Connor's room, listening to his son's voice rise and fall in excited explanation. Claire's responses warm and engaged. When she left, Connor hugged her goodbye. "See you tomorrow? See you tomorrow." 3 months after Claire moved in, a storm knocked out power to the entire neighborhood. David spent 2 hours in the basement with the building super and an electrician from the city, helping identify the blown transformer and routing temporary power to keep the emergency lights on. When he got back upstairs, he found Claire and Connor in his apartment, playing cards by flashlight. "We got hungry," Connor explained. Claire made sandwiches. "Hope that's okay." David looked at Claire, who shrugged apologetically. "Your door was unlocked." "I didn't want him here alone in the dark." "It's okay. Thank you." They ate together in the flickering candlelight. Connor told a rambling story about a field trip to the aquarium, something about touching a starfish and learning that they don't have brains, which seemed to fascinate him endlessly. Claire listened like it was the most interesting thing she'd ever heard, asking questions, laughing at the funny parts. David watched them both and felt something shift in his chest. Something that had been frozen for 10 years starting to thaw, painful and necessary. After Connor fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from the excitement of the blackout, David and Claire sat on the balcony, wrapped in blankets against the November cold. The city stretched out below them, dark except for scattered emergency lights and the headlights of cars navigating streets without traffic signals. "This is nice," Claire said quietly. "Yeah, I missed this. Just being with someone. No performance, No pretending. David nodded. Me too. She leaned her head on his shoulder. He let her. They stayed that way until the power came back on and the world lit up around them, sudden and bright. 6 months later, Claire's TV stopped working again. David stood in her doorway, toolbox in hand, grinning. Really? I swear I didn't break it on purpose. But her smile said otherwise. Ooh-huh. He crossed to the TV, which was now positioned differently, in a room that had been fully unpacked and decorated. Her artwork hung on the walls. Books filled the shelves. It looked like a home. David knelt behind the TV. Claire watched from the couch. You know, you could just move in here. Save yourself the walk across the hall every time something needs fixing. David glanced back, eyebrow raised. Is that an invitation? Maybe. What about Connor? He already asked me if we're getting married. I think he'd be thrilled. David turned back to the TV, hiding his smile. What did you tell him? That I didn't know. That it's complicated. Is it? Isn't it? David finished checking the connections. The HDMI cable was loose again, exactly like the first time, and stood up. The TV flickered to life. Some nature documentary about penguins. There. Fixed. Thank you. He set the toolbox down. Sat beside her on the couch. The apartment smelled like vanilla candles and the tomato sauce she'd been simmering for dinner. Through the window, you could see David's balcony across the way. The curtains were open. His apartment looked warm and lived in. I'm not ready for marriage, David said carefully, choosing each word. Not yet. Maybe not for a while. Okay. I need to be sure. For Connor. For me. That this is real. That it's going to last. I understand. But I want this. Whatever this is that we're building. Claire took his hand. Me too. I want Connor to have what we had. Someone who shows up. Someone who stays. I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that. Nobody can. You're right. But I can promise I'll try. I can promise I'm here now. That I choose this now, and that I'll keep choosing it. David looked at their intertwined hands. That's enough. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. Spare key to my place, in case you need it. She took it, turned it over in her palm. Emergency TV repair access? Something like that. She leaned in and kissed him. Soft, tentative, like they were still figuring out how their pieces fit together after all this time. When they pulled apart, David's phone buzzed. Connor, texting from across the hall. Is Claire coming for dinner? We have pasta. David showed her the message. Claire laughed. Guess I should go. Guess so. They stood. Walked to the door together. In the hallway, they paused. The same hallway where they'd first recognized each other. Where they'd sat and cried and finally told the truth. David? Yeah? I'm glad the TV broke. He smiled. Me too. Both times. Especially both times. They crossed the hallway together. Not to the same apartment, not yet, maybe not ever, but to the same dinner table. The same laughter. The same small, careful routines that were building something new from the ruins of what they'd lost. Connor greeted them at the door, holding up a new drawing. 3 stick figures. A house, a sun, a dog. This is us, he announced proudly. I added a dog because Claire said we should get one. David looked at Claire. You said that? She shrugged, grinning. It came up. We can't have a dog, the lease says. The lease says no dogs over 25 pounds. We could get a small one. Claire, a really small one. Like a terrier. Connor was bouncing now. Can we, Dad? Please? David looked between them, his son, and this woman who'd come back into his life through a series of impossibly unlikely events, and felt something in his chest expand. We'll think about it. Yes. Connor pumped his fist. Claire caught David's eye over Connor's head. Mouthed, thank you. He mouthed back. We're getting a small dog. She grinned. They sat down to dinner pasta with Claire's tomato sauce. Garlic bread. Connor had helped make. Salad that no one would eat, but David insisted on anyway. Connor talked non-stop about his day, about the dog they might get, about the drawing he was going to make of their future dog. David and Claire listened, passed serving dishes back and forth, fell into the easy rhythm of people who'd known each other in one life and were learning each other all over again in this one. No promises about forever, no certainty about what came next, just the choice to stay, to show up tomorrow and the day after that, and keep showing up until eventually you looked back and realized you'd built a life without meaning to. Later, after Connor was asleep and Claire had gone back to her own apartment, David stood on his balcony looking across at her window. The lights were still on. He could see her silhouette moving around, probably working on an illustration project. His phone buzzed. Claire. You watching me? David. Maybe. Claire. Creep. David. You texted me first. Claire. Fair point. Coffee tomorrow? David. Same time? Claire. Same time. He watched her turn off the lights, saw the glow of her phone as she presumably read his response. Then, darkness. David went inside. Checked on Connor one more time. The boy was sprawled across his bed, one arm hanging off the side, mouth open, completely and utterly asleep in the way only children could be. He adjusted the blanket, turned off the nightlight, pulled the door mostly closed. In his room, David got ready for bed, brushed his teeth, set his alarm, plugged in his phone. On his nightstand sat the chipped pottery mug Claire had made him a decade ago. He'd used it that morning for coffee, would use it tomorrow. He got into bed, turned off the light, lay in the dark, thinking about the life he'd built and the life he'd lost and the life that might be forming in the space between. No guarantees, just possibility. And for the first time in 10 years, David Harper fell asleep without the weight of regret pressing on his chest.